Hello, I'm Kathleen Marie, and welcome to a Spring Park Glory Days event, the 50th anniversary. This evening, many have gathered to celebrate and recall the good old days. Hundreds of photos have been resurrected and put on display, and a handful of speakers have been asked to tell their stories. These stories will lay out an understanding of how special people and businesses played a part in this city as it began to take shape. Please join me now in a waltz through time, Spring Park Glory Days.
And this is Sue Cathers. And Sue, I understand that you've been quite involved with this, what is happening here tonight. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, the West Tonka Historical Society, in honor of Spring Park's 50th anniversary as a city, is doing this presentation of Spring Park Glory Days. Recently, we've started to do presentations about neighborhoods in the area, and that has gotten a lot of interest.
So tonight is just basically Spring Park and the Glory Days, they're calling this, right?
Right.
How long have you been involved with the Historical Society? And I know you people call it the Hysterical Society, but how long have you been involved?
About 10 years.
How many people do you think are going to show up tonight?
We really don't have an idea. We're thinking somewhere between 200 and 400. Some people have thought 600, but the Gillespie Center doesn't hold that many, so quite a few actually.
Well, it's going to be a fun event. I can see that right away. Is there anything else you want to add?
Well, the next event we're planning for probably a year, at least a year from now, will be on Island Park. So if anyone has any memorabilia or items or photos that we could use for that, to please get in touch with the Historical Society.
Good. Okay. Well, that's an invitation to get involved. Thanks, Sue.
Thank you.
This is Don Cox. Hi, Don.
Hi.
I understand that you have big part in the past in this area. The Cox name has been around for a long time. Can you say a little bit about that?
Well, my family came here, and my dad started in business here in 1915. I've been here since 1926. And this board kind of tells the picture of what Cox Brothers was like in the days when it was in operation. Unfortunately, it's been merged into other companies now, and things have changed. The property is where Blue Lagoon Marina is at the present time. My grandfather came here in 1924 and was the first postmaster in Spring Park. Had Tim's Grocery. That came about because the Hotel Del Otero was the first post office until it only closed in the wintertime. Consequently, they had to have a post office that was full-time. My grandfather would meet 7 trains a day coming out from Minneapolis with the mail, because this was the end of the line, as Jim Hill Hotel was, the Hotel Del Otero was the turnaround or the terminus of the railroad at that time.
And what year was that?
That it was in, he started here in 1924, I believe it was.
Well, we're looking forward to hearing all the stories that you're going to be telling later. I'm sure you'll be able to elaborate a little more then. This is Larry Bino. And Larry, I understand you are the president of the West Tonka Historical Society.
Right now, we've got one of the best groups of people, dynamic people who research these things. You've seen the articles in the paper. This function tonight here, we've got people that are really gung-ho and really doing a good job, marvelous job. I can just sit back and kind of relax. They set it all up and everything.
Carry the name as president?
Yeah, right. Walk around, talk like a big shot, but really don't do anything, you know.
And how did the Historical Society get changed, the name changed to Hysterical Society?
I don't know what people just started calling that, you know. They said, yeah, you're going down to Hysterical Society again, and it just kind of stuck, so everybody calls it the Hysterical Society.
Kind of goes along with all the things that you're learning about history, isn't it?
Well, it does, and things really were quite crazy for a while. Now, like I said, it's mellowed out. Everything is just functioning. You know, we've got people like Sue and Carol over there. They're just gung-ho, just good workers, good people, doing a great job, so. You know, like I said, I can just kind of sit back, and now it's all come together, and it looks nice. We get nice write-ups in the paper, and this function tonight, look at the beautiful displays here.
Do you have regular meetings that you meet monthly or weekly?
We have a board meeting once a month in the winter months. We try not to meet in the summer. People are gone. And about every other month, we'll hold a big meeting. We'll have guest speakers from people on Indian artifacts about the area, archaeologists, to things like this, you know, the people that used to own businesses in town, or people that have lived here all their lives, homesteaded. So we try to find somebody interesting, and the last 2 or 3 years, we've gotten dynamite people.
And those are open to the public?
Open to the public, there's no charge. We always have coffee, cookies.
And how do you advertise that to the public?
It's usually in the Laker. And we also have mailings, and anybody who's a member gets a mailing.
Well, it sounds like a real fun hobby to be involved in. And it's nice.
The funny thing about it is I would have never been involved in this. I saw an ad in the paper, and it said if you have any old photos. Well, I bought a 100-year-old house up in the Highlands, and it was owned by the Hustis family, and it was the Baptist Assembly grounds. It was the main house up there, and it had been in the same family for 100 years. And all the photos were left there. So I just said, well, I'll bring them down to this meeting. Maybe they can use them. And I came down with a shopping bag full, and the society had about 1 table full. And I had about 6 times as much as they had.
And that's when you were made president?
No, I got a call about a week later, and somebody said, we got an opening on our board. Would you like to get on? I said, gee, I don't know. I don't know nothing about history, you know. I wasn't good in history in school, you know. No, you'll like it, you know. So I got on. It was about 6 months later. I was president and been stuck with it ever since. But I do enjoy it.
But this is a different kind of history than you learn in school. This is more personal because you're here and within it.
And it is, and you know, we have artifacts. We don't have a home for our stuff yet. We have a display case here at the Senior Center, and we always wanted to build on to the depot. I don't know if people know, but that depot was moved by the Historical Society down there to the lake. So, and we've got artifacts in everybody's houses, you know, and we want things that people can touch, not behind I take stuff to schools. I work for Wayzata Schools, and I speak to the classes there, and I take whole boxes of stuff in, and old toys and everything, and I pass them around, touch them. Sure. You got to touch history. You can't just look at it.
This is Joy and Mary Alice. These ladies are sisters. And Joy, I understand that you have been connected to something to do with Spring Park here, and I'd like to have you elaborate on that just a little bit.
Okay, the Historical Society is having the Spring Park Glory Days, and our family was one of the early settlers in the area and had a nursing home in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s here in Spring Park, and we're here tonight to talk about that.
Okay, and Mary Alice, where was that nursing home?
It was called the Twin Birch Nursing Home.
Originally?
Before that, it was called the Twin Birch Inn, which was a different business than the nursing home. So
that Twin Birch and the Presbyterian Homes goes back a long way.
And we're going to talk about some of that tonight. Before Twin Birch was a nursing home, it was a restaurant, and we'll be speaking about that a little bit tonight as well, too.
And so now, do you two live in the area?
Yes, I live on Casco Point Road.
and I live on North Arm Drive.
So you've lived here all your life and just stuck to the area. It's a beautiful area, isn't it? Well, thank you. I look forward to hearing your talk this evening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This is Jeff Magnuson, and he's been involved with the Historical Society with the Del Otero Hotel.
That's my talk for tonight. I've collected a lot of memorabilia of the Lake Minnetonka area, and I've kind of specialized in the Del Otero quite a bit, so I've learned a lot about it over the last 20 years. So I've been asked to share some of the information tonight.
That'll be very interesting. Now, you have been working with the Historical Society for a number of years. How long?
Since 1993, I became a board member, the first meeting I went to, and we've really progressed quite a bit over the years since that time. In addition to having speaker meetings every other month, we've started a lot of other functions, such as the historical tours of the lake area. which we've done both by bus ride and by Alan Alma's boat. So it's been a lot of fun. And
You meet a lot of people, don't you?
yeah, we have a lot of interesting speakers come in from a wide variety of areas. We've had some very interesting meetings on the renewal project in Mound, which has brought a lot of new members in. But we also have a lot of more historical-based meetings. We had a very interesting talk by the state archaeologist on the Indian mounds, which was very interesting.
That would be. Well, I'm looking forward to doing some work with the Historical Society by covering some of your events. So thank you very much, Jeff, for the information, and look forward to hearing your talk.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
On behalf of the West Tonka Historical Society, welcome to Spring Park Glory Days in honor of Spring Park's 50th municipal anniversary. We're very proud of that. As a city, we figure we're very young compared to our neighbors on both sides. But we're quite proud of the 50th anniversary. We had our municipal celebration a week and a half or so ago, and this particular event here sort of tied into it and kind of was the afterthought of it. It worked out very well. West Tonka Historical Society is selling books by the entrance. For the first time tonight, we're offering a new book, Lake Minnetonka, picturing Lake Minnetonka, by local author Jim Ogman. And Jim, are you here? I'll start out here. Spring Park actually was part of Orono Township from 1889 until 1951. So we were part of Orono for many, many, many years. And we could kind of preface that a little bit by the name Spring Park. That didn't something that just didn't happen. The original reason that it happened was that we had wells in Spring Park that actually were similar and close to being an artesian well. And the trains used to stop there to fill up their steam engines. And the park-like setting is what led to the name Spring Park, and that's kind of actually where it came from. In 1951, for whatever reason, there were a group of residents in Spring Park that felt that they had about as much of Orono as they wanted to have. And so they formed a petition to create a new municipality. And at that time they were called villages. The first petition included what we have today at Spring Park, plus Casco Point, down through Navarre, including Navarre, and down County Road 19 to the Narrows Bridge, and then back down 19 to the Coffee Bridge. That petition failed by a very small percentage. The second petition, which passed in 1951, was what we have today. First City Hall, believe it or not, was located right next to the downbeat. And if you take a look on the pictures or the drawing that one painting that Dick Ma did, you can see it there. It's a small white building that was there, and that served for a few years, and it was rented by the city from Dick Bruzik. And they used to have to pay $25 a month, and Bruzik had to heat it. In that same year, 1951, the village of Mound made a move on Spring Park. And the move was they tried to annex, they came right down the railroad tracks, and they wanted to annex the J.R. Clark factory, and they wanted to annex the Streeter Industries building. And they went to court on it, and they wanted it to broaden their tax base in Mound, obviously. People in Spring Park didn't think that was such a great idea. Somewhere around 1963-64, the city decided what we'd do is go back to the residents in Spring Park and ask for an okay to change the form of government to what they call an optional Plan A form of government. And under that form of government, you have an elected mayor, 4 council people, and then the council hires or appoints chief of police, and they hire or appoint the clerk treasurer. And that's what we did. It passed unanimously, and that worked out, seemed to work out pretty good. Anyhow, 1966-67, a fellow by the name of George Myers, who played big bands and small bands at the Downbeat, and Don Bill and myself decided that we were going to maybe run for the city council and see what we could do. So we really didn't have a platform, and we didn't have any kind of a program or anything else, but lo and behold, we actually wound up winning. And one of the issues that we had at that time, the city had a municipal liquor store. And it was a small, dilapidated, old building that kind of sat down in the area of, I don't know if you remember where the Golden Horn was, between the Golden Horn and what then would have been Red Sporting Goods or the Dello Beauty Shop now. And one of the things I remember when we were going through that campaign was that it seemed like in a municipal liquor store, you always have shortages that no one can account for. They don't seem to ever know why they get them, but they always do. And we were no exception. And I can't remember what the dollar amount was, but the one thing that stuck in my mind was we were 370 bottles of beer short one year. And I said, you know, this really doesn't seem like it's going to work. So one of our campaign pledges was that if we were elected, we were going to get rid of the municipal liquor store, and we were going to write an ordinance that would allow the sale of on-off sale liquor license, kind of change everything around a little bit. And so, like I said, we were elected, and that is one of the first things that we did. And at that time, I don't remember what our liquor license cost, but I know the valuation on the building had to be $125,000, less the land and fixtures. And Lord Fletcher's was one of the first ones that came in and applied. And the one thing that really kind of impressed me with Fletcher's was that Bob Nagley Sr. and his partner Horace Murfin actually went out and went door to door to get those petitions signed. And Lord Fletcher's was being built, and it was built. About this time, we're getting into the end of 1967, and in the municipal world, you always have elections, especially for mayor, every 2 years. And I thought I was doing a pretty good job, and I was kind of confident of what was going on. We had this Lord Fletcher thing going on. The one thing that we did have when we did the public hearing for Lord Fletcher's restaurant was we had the largest public hearing that we ever had in the city that I can ever remember. And in the old Elizabeth Gardner School had been put into operation as our city hall, and it had like huge doors in the middle where you could raise the doors up and you could expand it, kind of like here where you could expand out into another room. The place was packed. And usually when people come to those public hearings, they're not coming there to tell you that they think it's a great idea or you're doing a wonderful job. And we had tons of people there from Orono, and we had quite a few people from Spring Park, and they were opposed to it. They didn't like the idea at all. And anyhow, we went through the public hearing, and we, to make a long story short, we rezoned the land, and Lord Fletcher's Lord Fletcher's restaurant was built. So I kind of thought things were going along pretty good. I had absolutely no opposition in that election, and it was one of the first elections that I ever can remember when I was running, and I thought, well, if you don't have any opposition, everybody must be pretty happy, and you're kind of a shoo-in. And I couldn't believe it. I'd have to say that one thing, if you run unopposed and you get beat, I'll tell you, it really changes your outlook on a lot of things. And that's exactly what happened to me. I couldn't believe it. I got beat. And so a new guy came in. On this particular point, I'm going to stop on my speech. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce Jeff Magnuson. Jeff is a 38-year resident with lifelong interest in local history. And Jeff has an extensive historical collection. He's a board member of the West Tonka Historical Society since 1993. So I'll let him talk, and then I'll come back for you with some more of my details.
Thanks a lot, Jerry. Just mic here. Well, obviously, I'm a little young to remember the Del Otero Hotel, but I've been, like Jerry mentioned, I've been studying local history for over 30 years out here, and I've collected a lot of information. I'd like to share some of that information with you that I've got here on the Del Otero tonight. So, anyway, Lake Minnetonka is well known for having many famous hotels. Most came and went in a relatively short time, usually burning down at the end of the first great tourist era in the late 1800s. The few surviving hotels were converted to rest homes or apartments, or just torn down. But there was one great Minnetonka hotel that operated for almost 60 years, and that was the Hotel Del Otero. Let's imagine Spring Park 100 years ago, the Del Otero towering high above the rise between the West Arm and Spring Park Bay. Approximately where the parking lot now sits between the Minnetonka Mist and the post office. Surrounded by acres of woods, picnic grounds, a ball field, and by the lake a fine swimming beach, and next to that a separate building for dancing and bowling, which in those days was known as a casino, but not to be confused with what a casino is today. Large steamboats and later fast streetcar boats
came up Spring Park Bay and docked at the large wharf in front of the hotel, approximately where the public boat ramp is now. Visitors who came by boat would enter the hotel through a pergola that was covered with flowering plants. Those arriving by train on the other side of the hotel would literally step off the platform right into the hotel. Inside, they would enter the lobby with its big fireplace, piano, and cozy stuffed chairs. After checking in, they could visit either the main dining room or the porch dining room that gave an excellent view of Spring Park Bay. Porches ran all around the hotel, making the best of the lake breezes. A separate circular porch over on the west end of the building allowed Victorian ladies a place to relax away from the rest of their families. A typical guest room included two comfortable double beds, a dressing table, and a couple of chairs, usually a rocker. The hotel began like many others in the lake area. It was James J. Hill and the Great Northern Railroad that prompted the building of the Del Otero, as well as the more famous Lafayette Hotel on Minnetonka Beach and Woolnose Maple Crest out on Island Park. When the Del Otero was built in 1887, the Great Northern was still only a regional railroad called the St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Manitoba. It would be another 6 years before the Empire Builder, as Hill was known, would push his rails to the Pacific Ocean and rename his railroad the Great Northern. The railroad spur off the main line in Wayzata had been completed to Spring Park in 1881. It was built primarily to siphon off the huge amounts of timber that were being cut down in the West Tonka area, as well as getting tourists out to Hill's Hotel in Minnetonka Beach. Hill could see that Spring Park would be a great location for another hotel. He ordered that the Del Otero be built at a cost no less than $5,000. It was said that the hotel was built upon Indian burial grounds, and indeed there are many records of mounds throughout the Spring Park and mound area. Early photos of the Del Otero do show mounds on the west end of the hotel, approximately where Spring Street enters Sunset Drive. There are a couple different versions on how the hotel got its name. One states that Hill named the hotel for his friend Judge Otero of New Mexico. Another says that the name Del Otero was selected since it supposedly translates to on the hill. The last owner of the hotel would tell people that Hill simply named it for himself. The three-story L-shaped hotel, built in the Rococo style, was originally built with 50 rooms and was advertised to accommodate more than 500 guests. The first manager of the hotel was George Hopkins. He would alternate managing the Del Otero in summer and the Coronado Beach Hotel in San Diego during the winter months. Hopkins ended up buying the hotel from the railroad within a few years after it was built, and he made several improvements. He added the casino building in 1900, and the beach and picnic grounds were improved. Mrs. Hopkins acted as hostess and was known for making every visitor feel at home. The hotel registered visitors from every major city in the U.S. and Canada. It was especially popular for the Southerners trying to escape the heat. So after this last summer, I don't know would it made any difference. The Del Otero also became known as a national honeymoon destination, not unlike Niagara Falls. The hotel had a full-time musical director, and formal music programs were published each season. There were 50 boats available for rent, or you could take a ride on the hotel's own launch. A big draw was the Fisherman's Special, sponsored by the railroad, that brought anglers from all over the country to Spring Park. The hotel was advertised in the National Health Journal in 1899 as the most delightful resting place in the Midwest. In addition to fishing, boating, bathing, guests were encouraged to take long, relaxing rides to the woods nearby. In the early 1900s, many Twin City residents began coming out to the hotel by train or streetcar boat to enjoy a Sunday picnic. At that time, there was a train arriving in Spring Park every hour. Adam King purchased the hotel from Hopkins in 1918. He was able to negotiate down the hefty asking price of $90,000. He was able to do this by guaranteeing that he would provide 2 trainloads of tourists each week to the hotel. He modernized the hotel by installing electricity, digging a well, and adding plumbing. And he expanded the grounds to over 40 acres. He added new bowling lanes and a new dance floor to the casino. And water toys such as a big slide and a water wheel were installed at the beach. In 1925, the hotel had a close call when a small fire started in the hotel, but it was contained and repairs made. I understand the hotel used to discard garbage in the hollow north of the railroad tracks, which would attract some of the local wildlife. As this area along Sunset Drive developed on its own, it kept the name Skunk Hollow. In the 1930s, Lloyd LeBrie's Collegiate Orchestra played in the hotel dining room every night and furnished music for dancing in the casino. Another group, Skip West's Del Otero Orchestra, also played on a regular basis. I recently spoke with a Mound resident who remembers sitting in a rowboat on a moonlit night in the summer listening to the orchestra music coming out from the casino over Spring Park Bay. Many Mound high schoolers attended proms at the hotel, and the U of M fraternities and sororities often held dances at the hotel. Throughout its history, the hotel prided itself on its excellent food. In 1940, a prime rib dinner could be purchased for $1, and a tenderloin steak dinner could be ordered for $1.25. By this time, there were 85 guest rooms, along with 9 separate cottages, a few of which you can still see along County Road 15. Throughout the 1930s, the hotel hosted special events such as speedboat races, political rallies, and Sunday dinners, but business steadily declined. During the war years, business did perk up a little bit for a while, since people were drawn from the Twin Cities who were restricted from going to outstate resorts due to the gas rationing. Nevertheless, in 1943, Mr. King sold the casino and half the picnic grounds to entrepreneur Ed Streeter. Finally, on July 16, 1945, the hotel that had outlasted almost all the others succumbed to fire. 50 guests, including a couple on their honeymoon, were out of their rooms at 3:40 in the morning. They had to climb from their room windows and cling to the porch roof until they could be rescued. Firemen from Mound, Wayzata, and Excelsior battled the fire. Water for the hoses had to be pumped out of the lake at that time. It was all to no avail. The hotel was a total loss, valued at that time was $75,000. It was suspected that the fire started in the kitchen and was caused by faulty wiring. After the fire, King sold the rest of the hotel property to Streeter. When interviewed at the time, King said that the days of the lake hotels and amusements were gone for good. Of course, he could not envision the day when quaint old homes or hotels would become popular bed and breakfasts, and excursion boats would once again ply the waters of Minnetonka. The casino building, which was used for a while as a war factory, was also lost to fire in 1946. The picnic grounds and surrounding woods were bulldozed to make room for industrial plants and the new county highway, the current County Road 15. Today there is little remaining evidence of the once great Del Otero. Now that's pretty much what I have here. I do want to invite someone up for a couple minutes here who has some first-hand knowledge of the hotel, and that would be the grandson of Adam King, Mr. Jack Hawkins.
I don't have too much to add, but I will say this, the Del Otero Hotel was just a remarkable place, and my mother was the hostess there, my father was the manager, and my grandfather was the owner, and I was a bellhop, so we all pitched in. And I do remember one time when the parking lot was full of cars, another bellhop and myself went out to see what the plates were, and we had a plate from all 48 states at that time. And then the very last band that we had was Lloyd LeBrie and his Hammering Harmonies with Tommy Dibble on the drums. And people would go there and have a nice dinner and listen to the music, and then after dinner the band would start playing and they would march from the hotel to the casino and playing as they went along. And this was just great. They would have the casino just jammed with people down there. And one particular night, I remember a man came in and he had a zoot suit with a reed pleat, and he had a long chain, and he was swinging his chain like this, and we all huddled around him because we'd never seen anything quite like that. But even today, when I look at the album or read the story of the fire, I still get tears in my eyes. It just seems like it was yesterday that it happened. That hotel just meant so much to me. It was just a great, great place. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, well, thanks, Jeff, and thanks, Jack. The only thing I can remember about the Del Otero Hotel was when it burned, and I think it burned for 5 days. And I can remember my dad drove my brother and I around and looked at it. Very remarkable deal. Next speaker will be Don Cox. Don is a lifelong resident of Spring Park and Mound, the son of Ray Cox, and Ray was one of the founders of Cox Brothers, established in 1915. So Don?
Well, as Jerry mentioned, my family, Edgar and Ray Cox, who was my father, started Cox Brothers in 1915. Cox Brothers was founded, as I said before, 1915, and they started with 2 teams of horses and wagons, which they helped build and maintain, and also handled the snow removal for this area. They also filled, in the wintertime, they filled many of the ice houses that were in the area, something you don't even relate to today. They had to go out when the ice was at least 30 inches thick and bring it in, and that was the refrigeration for the summertime in these big ice houses. It would just layer upon layer of solid cubes of ice with some sawdust in between them. Cox Brothers mechanized their grading and excavating operation. They did also maintenance of the roads for Hennepin County and other municipalities in the area. In 1938, they thought they were going to go out and strike it rich, and they moved a bunch of equipment out to the Black Hills to try and mine gold, and that wasn't too successful. That only lasted about 1 year, and they gave that up as a bad deal. One of the excavating projects that Jerry talked about was Lord Fletcher's restaurant, and it involved extensive, extremely large foundations. And I asked the contractor, I says, why the excess foundations? And they said, well, the plans came from a like building in Palm Springs, California, and they were designed to withstand earthquakes. My comment was, I said, well, I guess it's the first time for everything. Charlie Groshin with Tonka Corporation patterned many of their toys after our equipment. In 1950, we started a ready-mix concrete operation and supplied much of the concrete in the area. After several acquisitions, it became Western Concrete Products that eventually became part of Apple Valley Ready Mix, at which time I joined Wigmer Brothers to handle excavating and grading, and the property now became Steve Kelly's Blue Lagoon Marina. To transvest from that just a little bit, and go back to 1918, when my maternal grandparents came to this area, Timothy Timlin and his wife Bertha and 2 daughters, Marie and Marguerite, Marge, moved to Spring Park from Verona, North Dakota, and opened a grocery store which had 1 gas pump. It was on the corner of 15 and 125. It was called Tim's Corner. It was with living quarters in the back of the store, and the store was the first post office in Spring Park. Previous to that, it was in the Hotel Del Otero, but the hotel closed in the wintertime, and there was more people lived here year-round, so they had to have a year-round post office. At that time, it served Spring Park, Foggerness Point, Casco Point, Navarre, and part of Island Park. In 1924, Marge married Carl Speed-Lindquist, the local iceman, and Speed and his brother Joe also helped Guy Gordon unload fur bales from boxcars on their way from Canada to Minneapolis. After they separated the liquor from the furs, they reloaded the cars and until Guy Gordon was found murdered on County Road 15 between Woodhill and Wayzata. That murder was never solved. Apparently he had a 1932 Pierce Arrow that was designed for hauling his liquor. And from there on, Marie married Ray Cox, and in 1925 built the house that stands next to the Blue Lagoon Marina. At one time, my grandfather would meet 7 trains a day to get the mail from Spring Park, and Spring Park was then the end of the line with a turnaround in the park until it was extended into Mound, and then it was a full turntable to turn the cars at that point. The Minneapolis grocers always had a big picnic in Spring Park, and for us kids, there was always a freebie. All you had to do was get there, because there was plenty of ice cream and pop and candy, and just show up. Marge became the postmaster in 1929 after the death of my grandfather. And Tim's store was then sold to Bill Netkett's family, and the post office moved to a new location next to the Log Cabin Cafe in part of the building that was Grant and Speed's restaurant, owned and operated by Grant and Jean Swanson and Marge and Speed Lindquist. I think Jean Swanson is here with us tonight. Tim's store was to become Joe Gibson Cedar Inn, and now is the home of the Spur Station. In about 1946, Grant and Speed's building was moved to the hotel property after the hotel burned, and that made way for Streeter's new building, and was owned and operated by Pat Kullberg as a Dello Cafe, and then Hurley and Ione Dahlman operated the Dello Barber and Beauty Shop, and then later it became Ardell Jones Dello Beauty. And then that moved on to the Graber building. The post office moved to a building that is now the Spring Park Laundromat, and after 25 years, Marge retired, and Ralph Nelson became the postmaster from the and then it was moved to the current location. Streeter Lumber was a lumber yard along with lumber built theaters and store fixtures. Stern Electric, Marks and Company, and Collins Iron Works were founded from the Streeter lumber operation. During World War II, Streeter converted his factory into making ammunition boxes for a factory of Northern Ordnance in Fridley, and after the war made wooden toy boats and other wooden toys. The new building south of the railroad tracks was sold to J.R. Clark Company, which manufactured rigid products, and then to Balboa Properties, which Jerry just talked about. The property north of the tracks, which was Advanced Machines property, is now West Arm Townhomes. That's basically brings you up to date on my family.
The one thing, obviously, that we have is a common denominator, which I think is as much an important part of Spring Park today as it was in the past, and definitely will be in the future, and that's Lake Minnetonka. And I think that Spring Park is a fun place to visit, fun place to live, and a fun place to do business in. And I think what I'll do now is turn the program over to our next speaker, which will be Doug Easthouse.
Jerry said to me that when he was a young boy, he looked out at the lake in Skunk Hollow, and he said this would be a great place for a boatyard and a marina. And in 1975, his vision became a reality. But for 50 years before then, that area was a one-block strip of small businesses on both sides of the street that came and went. The glory years of Skunk Hollow, in my opinion, was from the early 1950s to the mid-60s. From the Korean War to the Vietnam War. In 1949, Eileen and Bob Barrett purchased the Lakeview from the Wicklands. Bob was a drummer up in Crosby and he had a small band. They moved to Minneapolis for a short time and then they purchased the Lakeview and they moved out the first season and lived in the unheated cottage. And the day they opened, their daughter Jeannie was born. After the first season, Dick Maw decided to promote concert jazz. His father was a district manager for Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and he got into the booking agent business and decided that jazz was his main thrust, and he wanted to bring in major nationally known bands at that time, strictly for listening pleasure. Well, the Lakeview had a capacity probably of 250 people at the max. There were chairs that were set up probably a foot from the bandstand. I mean, they jammed them in as much as they could. It was unbelievable. Some of the bands that he brought in were Don Shirley, Bob Scobie's Frisco band he brought in 3 or 4 times, Turk Murphy. He brought in Dizzy Gillespie for a couple of weeks, George Shearing, Oscar Peterson. He brought Dave Brubeck in for 2 times. Once he stayed here for about 3 weeks, and Vern Gagne taught Dave's kids how to water ski. Tony Lee Scott, who was on This Is Your Life, Duke Ellington, and Count Basie. But I'd like to go back before I get into the music. And in 1940, I was in grade school in 41st and Colfax in Minneapolis, and a classmate of mine moved out to Mound. His family was moving out to Mound, and I thought it was the end of the earth. A year later, my parents moved out to Navarre. My father went to work for Streeter Fixture Company as a cabinet maker. My mother worked for the Streeter Box Factory. In about 1963, for lack of capital, failing health with his father and his brother, Dick Maw walked away from the Lakeview. Ronnie Nelson tells that when Bobby got it back, he and Bob walked back into the Lakeview and the piranha was frozen in the fish tank. Dick Brusick continued to provide great listening and dancing music. The Percy Hoops band probably changed to the George Myers band. George was a very talented musician who could compose and arrange his own music. He had his own X-ray business, but he played nights and weekends at the Downbeat. At one point, he left and toured with Woody Herman's band. He was gone for about 6 months. Some of the other big bands that Dick brought in were Woody Herman, Kay Winding, Jimmy and Tommy Dorsey, Count Basie, Julie Christie, Nita Bryant, and this covered that period for 12 or 13 years. There was never anything like it. There wasn't Orchestra Hall, there wasn't the Ordway, there wasn't Guthrie Theater, there wasn't the Carlton, and this was for some strange reason, this was the music center. There were a lot of characters that were there. There's a million stories. I think it was an era that a lot of us who remember have great memories. Of course, Johnny and Bev Scholl had their after-hours party. In 1968, Lord Fletcher's opened up, and it's been ably run by Alan Bell all these years. So Spring Park became an entertainment and social center, and for those of us that remember, we say thanks to all those musicians, those great musicians, and in particular to Eileen Nolan and the Burek family, to Dick and Don Maw, and to Dick Brusick. Thank you very much.
Alice Minnow Westland and her then husband and her daughter, who was our mother, purchased the parcel of property known as Twin Birch in the late 1920s. The property was located where the main building of Presbyterian Homes is currently located. The property ran from County Road 15 back to Black Lake. The lot was abundant with fruit trees as well as pine trees along the roadside. Alice named the property Twin Birch because of the two birch trees in the front yard. The landscaping has changed throughout the years, and the main house then was set back on a small hillside. During the Depression, Alice's husband died, and she and our mother, Hazel, survived and managed by selling homemade pies and pastries supplied by the fruit trees on the property. She began raising chickens in the backyard and then opened her home into a restaurant and dining room, specializing in steak and chicken dinners, and that then became known as Twin Birch Inn. Alice cooked and Hazel served. It was a big house with extra space, and Ed Streeter would refer his new employees from the Streeter Industries to Alice for lodging and meals. Bud Smith, who owned the gas station in Seaton, would do the same, and that was how our parents met. Luther Anderson, our father, was one of the new boarders referred by Bud Smith to Twin Birch for lodging, and our father married the landlady's daughter. Alice's husband died and she remarried again, and some of her early boarders included Carl Odemark, Ed Streeter, Ray Jarvie, Al Gallistel, Tom Brandville, Herman Renner Sr. and his son Herman Renner Jr., E.J. Patterson, who would become my godfather, and a 16-year boarder. Bert Larson worked there as a young boy, and he would often quip about cleaning out her chicken coop. Pat Patterson would go on to be the village clerk in Spring Park. Our father went on to become a justice of the peace, as Jerry was talking about. And all of the above boarders and many others would go on to be lifelong family friends. During World War II, she closed the restaurant and took in war workers. Other buildings on the property were rented to others in the community, often to young newlyweds. Even Andy and Carrie Scarrett and their son Norman rented a cottage for a while when they were building their home, and I think he was in high school at the time. She began a nursing home in 1949, and I'll let Joy tell you about that.
Well, Alice began the nursing home with one resident, and her first resident was the mother of Lil Trask, who was Mrs. Morris Trask. Many of you will remember Morris Trask. Morris and Lil lived next door to Twin Birch. The nursing home business grew from there, adding additions and building extra beds as they went along. By the 1960s, it was licensed for 22 beds. Luther and Hazel lived on Kings Road on Black Lake, a short distance away. They had purchased a summer cottage, as many of the families did back then. The cottage had originally been purchased by the Andrews sisters. Their cousin Gladys was married to Milton Thirlwall, who lived next door. In 1961, Luther and Hazel purchased the Trask property next door to the nursing home, the home that was on the Trask property. The Trasks built a new home down by the lakeside, and then they would go on to sell the middle portion of the property to the apartments. Our grandmother began to age, and Luther, our father, became more actively involved in the administration of the nursing home. Mary Alice and I literally grew up in the environment of the nursing home, and we were both actively involved in the personnel and nursing management during different time periods of our lives. In 1974, the business and property was sold to partners Don Thompson and Warren Ortenblad, who purchased the surrounding property and began building the current complex. During the span of the 1930s through the 1970s, the Ray Coxes, the Edgar Coxes, Morris Trask, and all their extended families were all good friends and neighbors. Morris Trask was often a mentor to Luther, and he and his wife Lil were always there to lend a hand whenever help was needed. The same could be said of the Ray Coxes, the Edgar Coxes, and the Andy Scarretts.
Well, I, like many others, grew up in the area and had a paper out as a young lad in Spring Park. I peddled papers at the Hotel Del Otero, walked through there every day of the summer and sold extras at the hotel. I can still remember walking through the kitchen. We walked in the front door and came out the back door, went down to those cottages and peddled a few papers. And the wonderful smells that were lunch or dinner coming out of the Hotel Del Otero kitchens. I also set pins at the casino across the street. I had a lot of memories of that. And being an entrepreneur, one summer I had a shoe shine stand down in Skunk Hollow at Al Gooder's barbershop. I didn't make any money, but I had a good time down there. A few years ago, the Minnesota Transportation Museum, the Streetcar Steamboat Division, decided to commission a series of paintings by watercolor paintings by local artist Kurt Carlson, who lives over on Casco Point. And he drew first and then watercolored a series of pictures, 5 in all, of the Minnehaha in front of various landmark locations throughout the lake. The 5th and the last one was the Minnehaha in front of the Hotel Del Otero and the casino. And it's a signed and numbered limited edition print. It's framed with a key from the Del Otero and also a brass tag. And it's an artist proof. And it's a great picture. And we, the MTM, would, in recognition of this evening and of Spring Park, would like to present it to the wonderful new Gillespie Center here to hang somewhere, hopefully in some prominent place within the building here. So on behalf of the MTM and the West Tonka Historical Society, I'd like to present it to Jack, Vice President of the Community Center here. Jack?
Thank you very much, Jim. I'd like to thank you on behalf of the Gillespie Center and the West Tonka seniors. I'm sure we'll find a very prominent place for that lovely picture. I'd also like to extend a thanks to the Spring Park people and also the West Tonka Historical Society. We hope to make very good use of this building with many events like tonight. Thank you very much.
Okay. Larry, on behalf of the City of Spring Park, we want to donate to you from the City of Spring Park to the West Tonka Historical Society a check for $1,000 for the efforts that you put into this program. Thank you.
A note to post our location. This music is live via the downbeat, West Arm Bay, beautiful Lake Minnetonka, the winding roads that lead out of the Twin City area. If you're in the Wayzata district, be sure to check this way to Spring Park and Navarre. And then to Spring Park and West Arm Bay, downbeat for George Myers and his septet. Entertaining for dancing nightly, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the weekends, all summer long. Well, the swing is actually to spring right now, and here comes a jazz note or two coming up with the group. This one's called Four Others, and the choir of brass leading off here. You're invited to dance or follow along the road.